Yeah, definitely. So let's get more reaction from Parliament. Lindsay Dentlinger standing by. Lindsay?
Shahan, with me, the DA's interim leader, almost maybe the leader of the party, John Steenhuisen. John, your colleagues saying no timelines given to what the President has said today. More of the same, or does it inspire a little bit of hope?
Well, look, I think there were some positive announcements that were made today, but what was missing today was the urgency of these. South Africa doesn't need a plan for 2 years' time or 3 years' time. It needs a plan for now. We're in an economic crisis. We have massive unemployment, and we need investment and growth. Very curious, the President announced that this job growth is going to come from the state sector. But over the course of the last 24 hours, we've been talking about how to cut the public sector wage bill. How do you put 800,000 new jobs onto the state and then cut the public sector wage bill at the same time? The big elephant in the room, South African Airways. We're about to spend 10 billion rand on wasting money on an airline that does not fly and is not profitable. That money could be far better spent on job centres, entrepreneurship hubs, providing economic opportunities and startup capital for small businesses, and yet we don't have any clearer direction about what's going to happen there. I think it was a big missed opportunity. I think people were expecting the bold reforms. I would have loved the President today to bring his reform agenda and slam it on the table at Parliament and say, let's get this passed through the House. Instead, it's more platitudes, more speech, more talk, more commissions, more committees. What South Africa needs now is action, and that action has to focus like a laser beam on implementation. That was absent today.
The DA always been a strong proponent for independent power producers. The President making some pledges in that regard, that's going to be speeded up, that we'll see action on bid window 5. Did that go far enough for you?
Yes, but what you need to be able to do is then create the opportunity for municipalities, particularly in metros, to be able to procure power directly from those independent power producers. It's no use just simply creating another layer of state bureaucracy. Allow municipalities to be able to procure that power directly so they can provide reliable energy, particularly if the President now talking about manufacturing. One of the bases of manufacturing is a solid, stable electricity supply. That has not been present. We're not going to stimulate industry and industrial growth without the most basics, which include electricity, water, and good, solid government.
The COVID-19 social relief grant being extended for another 3 months. The finance minister is supposed to table his budget. Where do you think that money is going to come from, and what happens after those 3 months?
Well, I think it's a very interesting question. I think it's precisely why the finance minister delayed the MTBPS. I think he wants to put a bit of distance between today's announcement and what is going to be the real side. The tide is going to be out when the MTBPS comes, and we're going to see how much of this plan is actually funded, and that's going to be essential to see. We all know there's a very tight fiscal space. We all know that Mr. Mbowene's got very, very little room to move. Some of these bold initiatives, the President again talking about NHI today. It is pie in the sky. We cannot afford the NHI, just as we can't afford these state-owned entities, just as we can't afford these debt servicing costs. So, these were, I think, some of the missing elements today. And hopefully Mr. Mbowene is going to colour them in. Where he finds the money from, I think it's going to be the work of a miracle worker.
John, lastly, getting young people into jobs. The President announcing 300,000 teaching assistant posts, more jobs through the NYDA. Is that something encouraging?
Yes, of course. But I think we must also remember that a lot of these jobs that we announced, we already have a lot of them around, and they are temporary work. Working for water, EPWP jobs provide only a few days of work a month for many people. If we want to really have young people brought into employment, what we need to do is to have job centres, skills development creations, and provide seed capital for entrepreneurship. The state does not create jobs. The state must create the enabling environment for the private sector to create jobs. You're only going to do that when you get serious about putting your money where its mouth is on providing those key elements that are going to have a massive uptake of young people into permanent, real jobs, not talk labour, a couple of days a month. That is not real jobs. It's not real work. And if we're going to get us out of this unemployment crisis, it's going to require a lot more concrete action to stimulate job creation in the private sector.
So where to from here? What do you want to see happen next?
Well, implementation. Okay, the President's announced these things today. Let's see the implementation. We've launched yesterday an implementation tracker, and we're going to use it to monitor every government department and every commitment the President has made today and measure it against its implementation. We need immediate action on many of these things, and that's where it always goes wrong for government. It always comes down to implementation. You can announce virtuous ends. If you're not implementing them, you're not making sure that they're happening, you're not getting rid of ministers who are bad at implementation, you're not getting rid of people who block your implementation, you're not standing up to the enemies of growth in South Africa, your plan is dead in the water. The President now needs to make sure that the rubber hits the road and what he's announced this evening actually starts to take place on the ground.
Thank you very much, John. We'll leave it there. So, Shahan, the DA's interim leader, John Steenhuisen, wanting to see the rubber hit the road, and opposition parties here saying that, as we know, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and they want to see implementation, and they want to see the President do that as fast as he possibly can.